My name's Scott Kirsner. I have three really great panelists. We're going to try to keep this fast moving, and I would love it if there are some questions out there, if you guys would be interested in lobbing some questions to kind of help make sure that we're relevant to you this morning. So I'll introduce my panelists really briefly. On my left is Sarah Hodges. She is director of the construction business line at Autodesk. She works just a few blocks away from here in the innovation and design building. One down, we have John Barrows. He is the chief economic development officer for the city of Boston. And then finally, all the way on your right, Tom Ryden is the executive director of Mass Robotics, which is a really cool, has anyone been to the mass robotics space yet? No hands? All right, Tom, you have to invite all these people over during one of the breaks today. Really cool shared space for robotics startups. So, John, I just want to start with you and see if I can provoke you a little bit into talking about how government thinks about fostering innovation, because in the city of Boston, you know, I'm often skeptical when cities give a name to a place and say this is going to be the tech zone or Silicon Hills or Silicon Prairie. Boston's former mayor, Mayor Menino, did that about 10 years ago with the Innovation District and kind of dubbing this part of the city the Innovation District. And I was initially skeptical that anything was going to happen beyond the press release or the announcement. So, I mean, can you talk about some of the nuts and bolts of what actually did happen to sort of make that, you sort of actually made stuff happen?
Right, yeah, no, great question. So we think placemaking is a big part of fostering any kind of cluster or any kind of activity in the economy. And so Mayor Menino branded it the Innovation District, and then along with that came some huge infrastructure projects. So infrastructure investment is big. And so connecting this part to the airport, through the big dig project, cleaning of the harbor, and then rezoning the area and creating predictability for investors. So you name it and you signal to everyone, this is what we want to do. You rezone, create predictability, and create some incentives. People come in and invest. And it was more successful than anticipated because now we've got a traffic problem, right, that we've got to solve for.
Yeah.
So we've got to create better ways in and out of the district.
But I mean, it is kind of amazing. I think the convention center next door opened around 2004, right, when they held the Democratic National Convention in Boston. And so in that period from about 2003 or 2004 to today, like all these buildings around here, this Westin, everything kind of
2002, we were collecting somewhere shy of $15 million in taxes. Today, we're collecting over $130 million in taxes in that same area. It was kicked off by the convention center. It's exploded. I just sat down with a developer yesterday, and their ask was, in their approved development, they want another 1 million square feet, right? And those are the kinds of conversations we're having in this district.
Cool. Sarah, I want to bring you into the conversation because I bet a lot of people out in the audience here are from small, medium, large companies. How do they plug in, and kind of how do you guys think, when you hear the word attracting innovation or fostering innovation, how do you think about the Autodesk role there?
Sure. So for those that don't know, so Autodesk is a global company. We're actually headquartered out in California, but we have a very large building. Our AEC headquarters is just across the way here in Dry Dock in the Innovation Design Building. And we think about innovation all the time, actually. And I can relate to the traffic problem, by the way, now being over in Dry Dock.
We're on it.
Yeah. And we think about innovation in a number of different ways. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing here locally, first of all. So we moved into the Innovation District January of last year, and we did that for a couple of reasons. One was to get closer to the local community, the design community, the construction community. The second was to get closer to education, universities, but also middle schools, preschools, et cetera, like really starting to get technology and innovation exposed to children of all ages and start to foster innovation among them from the earliest starts all the way through to when they graduate. And what we've been doing is not only reaching out to the local community, but we've actually built a space. And I understand some of you perhaps visited it yesterday. We have a 32,000 square foot building. It's called the Build Space. It sits connected to our office buildings. And there we host people from the public on a weekly basis. We also have a residence program where we have 20 startups. And these can vary in size, small to medium, where you can actually come in. You can have the space free available to you. You can use our software, but you can also use use up to 60 different pieces of equipment that we have. And the whole premise of our innovation building is to test, try, fail fast, iterate, and try again. And so for members of this audience, whether you're a small company, you're a medium company, you're a large company, there's something in it for everybody, whether it's projects you're looking to do yourselves or you're looking to learn from others. The other thing that we've done is really think about the local startup community, bringing them into the innovation build space that we have, but also cultivating a lot of relationships with them too. Understanding through a partner of ours is Mass Challenge, understanding what people in the community are doing at the startup level for innovation, helping provide access to technology and tools to them. And the biggest benefit for us is that we learn from them too. So it's really stifling this innovative community around us.
Okay, so can you translate for us for a second before we go to Tom? So I often hear companies talk about ecosystem building, and we want to plug into the ecosystem or support the ecosystem. But how does that translate when you think about kind of the ROI that it delivers to Autodesk? I mean, at some point, right, it has to have some financial impact to the company?
Yeah, of course. And I think we look at it as a long-term ROI, though. I mean, from a monetary sense. What we find the biggest ROI in is the learning part. So we're a software provider, and the software we produce is definitely enabled and infused by feedback that we get from our customers. But the biggest application comes when we see our software being actually used in practice. And so for us, the ROI short-term is that learning. Like, what can we do better in our tools? What connections do we need to make from our tools to other hardware that's out there? Or how do we need to bring our tools to market in different ways to support small businesses, large businesses, startups? So there's sort of a short-term benefit in learning. Long-term benefit is that over time we nurture these relationships. Our software becomes critical, mission critical to the work people do, and that becomes an ongoing relationship that we have. So
cool. So Tom, you come out of the robotics space, right?
Yep.
iRobot, video, sort of telepresence robots. Can you tell us what's the thinking behind mass robotics and why it's important for this ecosystem?
So we created Mass Robotics really to be the center of robotics, create this cluster around the development of robotic technology. And one of the main reasons was the city's getting more expensive. It's harder to create startups that take room, essentially. And robotics companies generally need space, they need test space, they need all sorts of the prototyping capabilities beyond just, it's not just another software company where they can have a couple little offices anywhere. And so that's hard to find. And in Kendall Square and in downtown Boston, it's really difficult to find. So we wanted to open a shared workspace where we can offer essentially access to all of this great equipment, and companies can only need to rent a desk or a small office and then yet have access to labs, test software, and so forth.
When I first heard about this project, I think in the early days, everyone was focused on Cambridge, right? Because MIT and Harvard both have really strong robotics programs. The thinking was, let's put it on the red line of the T, probably out by Alewife, where real estate's a little bit cheaper. Why did you come to Boston? Did the city do anything to lure you here, or was it just kind of available cheap real estate?
So first of all, the city was a phenomenal help in helping us find a location, and back to this idea of where do you want to locate, because we want to create this hub, this clustering. We looked at a number of cities. We looked at Cambridge, we looked at Somerville, we looked at other locations within Boston, and we needed to find a nice match of all the things that we are looking for: access, space, industrial space, the ability to grow and expand, and affordability. So startups don't have a lot of money, and essentially Cambridge is getting really pricey.
Cambridge is full, yeah.
So for us to rent a huge lab in downtown Cambridge and then offer that as a shared resource becomes way too pricey for these companies.
So there were some city or state incentives, though, that sort of made it possible for you to create?
Yeah, so Boston not only helping us find a location and working through the logistics of that, also contributed in terms of helping us. We're in a City of Boston building, and they helped us locate in there and provided some incentives for us to be there.
All right, cool. I want to ask one more question of John, and then I'd love to, we don't have a whole lot of time, but I'd love to open it up to your questions. And I'm told there are mic runners in the room, so if everybody's properly caffeinated and awake, I'd love to bring you into the conversation. John, what are some other things? I want you to be as cutting and incisive as possible. Like, what are some things that you see other cities and states doing that just doesn't feel to you like it works when you're trying to spur innovation? I mean, I mentioned the thing at the beginning of like, they give a name to a part of the city that they're trying to develop and hope good things will happen. But like, what else do you see cities doing?
That's a tough question, Scott. I hate to throw cities under the bus, right? But we do watch cities. We're watching cities all the time for what they're doing that's working. But when you do that, you're also finding out what's not working, right? And I think naming is not enough. What we're doing right now, we just launched a citywide planning process, the first master planning process in 50 years. And we're asking questions like, what do we do to protect the space that you are in now to make sure that advanced manufacturing, robotics, can continue to exist, that autonomous vehicles can drive in the right locations, that drones can fly where they need to fly, et cetera. And so we need to zone the city in the appropriate way after we brand it to make sure that we don't have land use creep, right? And that we have enough diversity in land use around the city in a way that it works, so that when I have a company like Autodesk looking, I can say, I've got the perfect space for you, and you're going to be surrounded by the right people. You're going to be surrounded by the mass challenges. You're going to be surrounded by the other firms that are trying to do like things, and we don't have. So in this new iteration of Boston's master plan, we're going to identify 2 other locations, and maybe brand those locations and talk about bringing in manufacturing jobs and bringing sort of advanced manufacturing in, innovation space, et cetera.
What are those 2 other neighborhoods you're talking about?
We'll announce it as soon as we...
Oh, I thought it was announced in the...
Was it announced in the draft?
In the Globe piece that talked about the draft today, like the...
today's piece.
Yeah.
I haven't read it, but you're probably right. So I'm going to go out on a limb.
Read today's Boston Globe.
Yeah, read today's Boston Globe.
Yeah, that's a good plug,
Thank you,
John.
Scott.
Yeah.
There you go.
Are there some questions out there? Because this topic of attracting and fostering innovation is kind of a big one and kind of could go in a million different directions. So anyone? Anyone? I can keep going. I'll ask questions all day.
Well, Scott, I just want to comment on one of the things that attracted us to the Innovation District is the fact that there are other companies doing similar things. So Autodesk is a sponsor of Mass Robotics. We're a nonprofit. But not only are they providing some financial funding, we have access to their software. We also have shared access to their space. So they have unbelievable equipment. We have some equipment. So the ability to actually share that and build a larger community, I think, is really helpful. And now we have some other contract manufacturers doing some very innovative stuff down in the IDB building. So this whole idea of can we build this center, this hub where all of this activity happens, really benefits all the companies that are down there.
Yeah.
I can add one thing to that if you don't mind too.
Sure.
The other thing that I find really fascinating is, so I spend all of my time, per the introduction, in the construction industry, and what I'm seeing now is sort of this convergence of the manufacturing and construction industry, and it's very similar. You think about the role of robotics, you think about the role of advanced manufacturing, it's all starting to make its way into the construction industry as well, and through building this community, we're learning new things that have been tested and tried for years in the world of manufacturing, how they now apply into construction as well. And that's been greatly enhanced by being in this area, being part of this community, working with associations, partnerships, et cetera, as well. So it's transforming not just one single industry, it's really transforming something much larger, which I think is fascinating.
Sir, would you talk about, so Autodesk has done similar things in San Francisco and probably some other markets, right, in terms of trying to education programs, connecting with entrepreneurs, kind of the learning that you talked about. Yep. So share with us kind of what you've seen happening in some other ecosystem that seems to be working right.
Sure. So I'll pick San Francisco because I think it's a really good one, and I'll start not with us, but maybe with others. So what we've started to see are people like Google, Apple, Twitter. They're all keeping their Silicon Valley headquarters, but they're creating these workshops or these innovation workshops down in San Francisco for the same reasons we moved ourselves from Waltham here down into Boston, and the same reasons we have a San Francisco office. They're really starting to build these technology innovation hubs and connecting at large with the ecosystems. For Autodesk in San Francisco, we have an office down on One Market, for those of you familiar with the area, and then down at the pier, we have something called Pier 9. And Pier 9 is a bit smaller than our build space here. It's about 12,000 square foot. And it's the same notion, though. It's about the makers community. It's a space that the public can come into. It has a residence program like our Build Space here as well. So if you're an independent artist or maker, or you have a small startup, you can come and we'll help you, we'll support you, we give you access to the machinery, access to the software. So it's sort of the same idea. The other things that we do are host sort of design nights, where we invite the community again, and we invite people from Pier 9 that don't necessarily represent who we are, but represent the work that they do, and give them a platform for sharing the work that they've done, and that gives them an opportunity to get exposed to a whole new audience of people that they might not ever get introduced to. So some of the examples.
Cool. Tom, I'd love to ask you a question about whether you went and benchmarked. Are there other robotics shared spaces for robotics startups around the world, or was there really nothing to look at?
No, this is really the first of its kind. So there are other dedicated Lab Central, which is focused more on pharma and biosciences. There are other types, but there's nothing in robotics. And we think that the technology is developing so rapidly that it's great to have a community where they can share learnings. There's a lot of commonality amongst sensors, as an example, or software, robotic operating systems. And by getting folks together, even though they're working on maybe similar projects or related, they can build off of some of that technology that's core and common across platforms.
And I think an important piece for government is to say to Tom and others, we might not have the right regulations that allow you to do what you want to do, right? But we're going to partner with you to make sure that we update our codes and update our regulations and get out of your way. And Mayor Walsh has been very clear that Boston is open for business, open for innovation, open for creativity, and he's put me in this place to make sure that that's true. So Tom has a direct line, and if there's anything in the way, if our inspection department or anybody is thinking that they're doing the right thing, I might just go in and help them rethink and get up to the new age thinking about how a city should be a place for greater learning and innovation.
Yeah.
The other thing, too, is that the city of Boston, and through John's efforts, is very forward-looking. So we have a self-driving vehicle regulations that allow that technology, which is not widely deployed, on the streets of Boston. First city in the nation that allows you to actually test. And when you talk to these companies, it's really important. There are test tracks in many other states that are generally out in the rural areas. And the people that are building this technology, it's all about, we want to interact with cars, with people, with cyclists. That's the challenge for this technology. And going and doing that out at some, out in the sticks, test track doesn't provide that. Boston heard that, understood that, said, okay, let's work and let's put together an application process, a test process. And that's a lot of work for the city on a technology that's brand new, but look forward to doing.
Yeah, so we should mention to the audience, if you want to test as a pedestrian or a cyclist these autonomous vehicles, you just have to go like across Summer Street, right?
Yeah,
over into the Marine Industrial Park, just a few blocks, and you can be a test. What do you crash test dummy, basically? For
let's stay away from that. That's what we want.
Be interesting news is all I would say. So maybe one last thing I want to touch on is, if we talk about city, state, federal government, and kind of what role you think they need to be playing in 2017 to really ensure that we have healthy innovation ecosystems, around the country or around the world. Like, what's one thing each of you would focus on and say, either at the city, state, federal level, we really need to be investing in X?
It's a good question. I mean, I would say, I'm going to take this city level and think about what we're doing locally with Autodesk, and I would say, if I made two things. One would be sort of allow the innovation to happen. So sort of oversee it, but maybe not control it to the level where it stifles things from growing at the rate that it needs to be. So trust the innovation people, the work that they're doing to do that and inform. And then the second part would be, at the same time, ask for some level of accountability. And the example that comes to mind for me is, coming from the construction space, is thinking about buildings and thinking about monitoring the health of the building, energy efficiency, et cetera. Hold some accountability to these companies that are investing in innovation to give back to the city as well, in terms of, we have this space, this is what we're doing, this is how we're fostering the innovation, but at the same time, we're being held accountable as occupants of this building and what we're giving back to the built environment, whether it's monitoring the energy efficiency, the tenant occupancy, the health and the safety of those occupants in the building, giving that to the city to help them further grow and expand sort of the built environment in a sustainable way. Those would be my two things.
John, how about you?
That's great. So given the inefficiency or ineffectiveness of the federal government and
How could you say that on a day like today?
and the need to be so local, right? I think local government is playing more of an important role, but it can only be effective in that role if, in fact, it takes a regional approach and is, particularly in a place like Boston, where the municipalities are so small, and really it's a greater Boston is what we're talking about. And so when I first came in, first thing we did first quarter was set up an agreement between Cambridge, Boston, Chelsea, Somerville, Quincy, and Braintree. We've got to make it easy, not only for us to be thinking about regulation in one way in policy, but for our neighbors to do the same, right? Because it's a region. Second is, when we think about testing technology, can we help convene and disrupt supply chain in a way that gets you in there in a way that you can't, right? And I think, so for instance, in the climate, so in the green space, energy efficiency space, we've done a lot of that. Regulations asking for this, asking for that. Can the city put our buildings? We've got a new plan that we just put out for $2 billion to build new schools in the city of Boston. How do you get in there and help us think differently, and then maybe use that as a platform for testing technology? I think we could do a better job of that, right? Using the city's procurement as a way to test technology that you can bring to the market.
Yeah, I love that.
Tom, I don't know if your answer is going to have to do with education, but I feel like we can't overlook, like, one of the things that you often hear the governor talk about in Massachusetts is, like, what helps create this economy is, you start a couple great research universities and wait 100 or 200 years, and, like, entrepreneurship happens. But go ahead.
So I want to echo something that John said. I think innovation doesn't stop at the borders, so it's hard to contain it. And self-driving vehicles, back to that point, right now you can get an MOU with the city of Boston, but you can't drive in Cambridge, which is 7 miles away. So we need to expand that. We need to make sure that all the municipalities have a similar vision and support innovation, and that's across states as well. That same technology, licensing in Massachusetts is different than New Hampshire. So what can we do on a federal and state level to encourage innovation across borders? And I think one area that I want to highlight that's doing really well is the new ARM Institute, which was spoken of a little bit yesterday. This is the Advanced Robotic Manufacturing Institute that was set up with federal money and also local matching. The state of Massachusetts has put in $5 million into this institute. And I think they are really looking at developing technology across the country, and they're opening regional innovation centers, one which will be here in Boston, to encourage manufacturing technology that is targeted for small and mid-sized manufacturers, to encourage the development of that section of manufacturing.
All right, great.
God, if
John,
I
you
could
want
just
to
add one other thing in terms of the academic institutions. A few years ago, major stakeholders in the area decided that Boston had all the elements to be a leader in digital health, right, innovation. And one of the things that was decided around the table was that we needed to provide our academic institutions the right tools and templates for IP transfer, right? And it was a big question. And it's really opened it up, and so that there's more that can happen MIT was way ahead of the game, but the other institutions weren't following. And so that agreement in the digital health initiative that was just launched 5 years ago has really set up these other campuses to be idea generators and know how to transfer that, and that's been really exciting.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's sort of spreading around those best practices, not expecting that it's just going to be one school that wins at it. All right, this has been really fascinating. We've covered so much ground. I'd love it if you'd help me to, there's one question in the back. I see somebody waving a microphone before I wrap up, and it looks like maybe
hey, Scott.
John Werner. All right, John, go ahead. I saw you on the live stream yesterday. You looked fantastic.
Great, thanks. So I'm curious, I was at MIT for a number of years and then was recruited to work at a Silicon Valley company. And I told them that I wanted to stay in Boston and make Boston our competitive advantage, and that I would be bi-coastal. And people in Silicon Valley laughed at me. They said, no, you're going to move out here. And I know we're leading in life sciences and robotics. And I said to my company, I wanted to make Boston a capital of augmented reality. How do we make Boston a serious capital of other kind of disciplines where people can co-locate from headquarters, kind of like what you said, Autodesk, some of the strategies you're doing. And congratulations, John, on GE landing here.
Thank you. So I think, I'd love to work with you and others, but it really has to be a multi-sector approach to doing that. And in digital health, there were three sort of verticals that we looked at. One was in funding. What does the VC community look like? What's the capital that's available in digital health space that allows you to fail, that allows you to sort of pick it back up? Is it risk adverse? Is it sort of creative? And so we really began to push and attract, and we set a target for building a major fund. Right now it's at $28 million to sort of really be risky in that space. The second was policy and legislation. What are the barriers? What can we do to help create sort of incentives and remove barriers to doing some of that work? And then the third was creating the kind of place where talent can showcase its work, be together with other accounts. So we launched the Pulse, the digital health incubator called Pulse in the Fenway area. And so there's all types of connectivity there. The first year, I think, it's run by Mass Challenge. And the first year, we expected to sort of host 15 companies. We now host 32. There were 400 applicants in the digital health space. There was more sort of interest than we imagined. If we could replicate that kind of multi-sectoral approach to any sector, really, to any sort of, whether it's, people are talking a lot about fintech and some other things, I think we can. And we've done it before. We can do it again. Love to talk to you about areas that you might be interested in.
All right, John, thank you for the question. I'm getting the signal that we're out of time for this panel, but please let me thank these three amazing panelists this morning.